Welcome back to the Berg podcast. With me today is Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And we're taking a minute today to commemorate in a way, right? To commemorate 2024. We will celebrate our 20th anniversary, our 20th birthday.
Yeah.
as a company. And we were talking about this a few minutes ago, and we were like, wait, is this the 20th year, or are we finishing the 20th year, right? And it's kind of like birthdays, like you turn 20 and you actually just finished the 20th year of living. So but yeah, 20 years. I mean,
yeah.
20 years is pretty incredible. In like, old corporate America, if you worked somewhere for 20 years, 30 years, like that was it. That was your.
Do I get a watch or something?
Yeah, right. You retired. That was you did it.
Yeah.
And I think for small companies, I don't know what the statistics are, but for young companies and small companies, I think 20 years is like a real milestone.
I know 7 years is a real milestone of like the ability to continue on. 20 years is another, and I think it's funny too, just because we're talking about 20 years, it's almost half my life. And, but because of the way I live and like day to day, we're talking about being a young company. 20 years isn't, I guess, not that young anymore, but it's just funny how like it's all about your perception of what that means.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's interesting to me because I'm almost 9 years here. And so I know Berg's been here for almost 20 years now. But for me, like the existence started 9 years ago, right?
Well, you have a unique perspective because you haven't been part of the team for the whole 20 years, but you've been part of the team for most of it, just in an outside looking in perspective, I guess. So you were around it, so you knew it was there, not like you just came in off the street, but you had that ability to see what was going on for most of those 20 years, even if you weren't part of the team the entire time, or at least internal team. Yeah,
for sure. It was actually pretty close timeline wise. Me and my baking career and sort of like us in a way reuniting, right? Not you quote unquote starting Berg Construction, because you had actually already been for probably a year or two sort of doing your own variation of.
We've probably been 24 years, as far as like when I actually started, but when we actually we go by when it was in or LLC corporated type thing is in 04. So I'd already been doing it. I still remember walking into the bank there in Morgantown. I think you were in the right office coming in, because there was like two offices coming in, and I look over and I see you there, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing here? Like, because we played, I think we covered it, but we had played hockey together in high school, and then, you went on to do your own thing, went out to another part of the state to do your schooling, and just, lost touch per se, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, I know that guy sitting in there. What's going on?
Yeah, man. I'm trying to think, like 20 years ago, we were pretty young. Like,
I guess it's all mindset. I feel young now. Some
I don't feel old yet.
I know.
I don't feel old yet. We actually talked about that recently too, but I don't feel old yet. But 20 years ago, it does seem like, it sounds like a long time ago. So.
Oh, to see what our baby faces looked like back then, right?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
A lot less facial hair, probably. Things of that nature.
So talk to me a little bit about the first 10, because like I said, I knew you, I knew about the business. I had some connection to the seeing you grow as a young business owner. But talk to me about the first 10. I mean, like, we've heard a little bit of the Ford Berg legacy, right? Grew up in a blue collar family, hardworking. Did some land clearing, some firewood, and since you were very young, around machinery, around equipment, and around like the trades, right? In a lot of ways. But there was a time there you said, well, I'm going to go do something different. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get an education. And like 99% of the way through that, you said, I actually think I'm going to go do something different again.
I'm gonna go back. Go back to the roots.
Yeah. So I know a little bit about how that transpired.
Mhm.
Um, and I you know, for me, it seems like a lot of it was. I mean, you had some triggering events, but a lot of it was um, like opportunistic,
Very.
right? You had some relationships. You were doing a little bit of work on the side. You enjoyed the opportunity to kind of be your own boss, create your own schedule, um, and and that sort of was like a jumping off in ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like they say, make your own schedule and do that kind of stuff, and I laugh about it that now just because it's a complete opposite of what people think it is.
Right.
They're like, "Oh, you're your own boss." I'm like, "Yeah, that means every customer you have is your boss, actually." But that's neither here nor there.
Sure.
No, but I think that it was just very opportunistic. There's no business plan. There was no market analysis. There was no, um, here's a hole in the market I'm going to fill. It was just that you started working, in the very beginning. It was doing a perk test for septic systems. And, it's funny because, like, I think the longest tenured employee besides myself is Joe at like 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I think back to those first years, and it was just a ragtag of people I knew that could work a day, a week, whatever. Because it was, when I first doing perk testing, and then that company needed more people. So, brother, cousins, kids from church that I knew. And that's kind of how like the construction side started as well. Because of, first we're friends from high school or the local community, Jared Kurtz and Brett Kurtz, same last name, but not cousin. I don't know. They're probably related somehow. It's the Lancaster County, but
Related, but not directly
exactly,
related. Yeah.
exactly. So those kind of guys working for us, there was just a whole plethora of people that came and went because at that point we were 2, 4, 6 people at most, and it was neat because it allowed me to one days when I needed people pull some in, but then when you're not having enough work yet, you can't sustain a staff full time. Basically the only person that's really been with me the entire time is Luke,
Mm-hmm.
and he's not even here any longer. But he's still within in the orbit, but
Yeah.
he's not here.
Right.
But
Right.
he was the first like real employee, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
And then for years we did like, what do we call that? Contract employees or something. We had some firm that they actually worked for, and then it was like a Mennonite thing. I don't know how it worked.
Okay.
G&H Services, I think they used to be out of like New Holland, but they were actually employees of them, and then they like subbed back to me. But they
Mm-hmm.
were, I don't know, it was like a interesting thing. It was an easier, less paperwork for me. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
That's how
Yeah.
it
You
made
didn't
me
have to
work.
hire them.
Right.
You paid them. They did the paperwork. Yep.
Right. And they just
Yep.
told me how much I owed them every 2 weeks or whatever the scenario was.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, and then there was Josh, and just trying to think back through those names of people that came and went in that first X amount of time, and how it was all talking to one person, they needed something, turned into something else. I think we were doing a lot of residential stuff. We were doing anything that was available to it that needed a piece of equipment, really. But then there was a couple jobs that were really, I guess you call like mile markers that were, oh, okay, now we need 8 pieces of equipment when we had 2
Mm-hmm.
type scenarios. The big dig, the leachate plant back in the day, and snow. I was thinking about our first snow contract. So we bought, I don't know if it was in 04 or 03 or whenever it was. There was actually a picture on Instagram years ago, but we bought this little mini excavator from a guy that was a little contractor, and he was actually going to the mission fields. And so he sold me the machine, and he's also like, "Hey, I plowed snow for this guy. Do you want the contract?" I'm like, "Sure, I'll take it." So, not doing great math back then. I remember putting like a plow on the truck, spending like all this money to put a plow on the truck in the first year. We might have done like $25,000 in snow.
Sure.
And the plow,
Yeah.
I think, cost 10 of it,
Yep.
But it was a little apartment complex up in Reading. And then like 2 years later, we got the HOAs at Summerfield in Elverson,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a little bit more. And we were doing those for a couple years, and then we got one in Honeybrook. And then I think 2 years after that, is when we got our first GSK. So we've been doing that same facility for quite a long time.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, and then it was like, I think it was, I'm guessing, like up and down to 6 people for like the first 8 years. Then all of a sudden it was like 15, and then 15 turned to like 25. And it seems like, there's a trajectory. If you scan back far enough, it looks like, the appropriate. But if you look at it, it definitely is more of a plateau. And, like they show it, it's like, it's not one straight line. Right? There's definitely.
You look at anything from far enough back and it looks like a straight line. But it definitely had some peaks and valleys.
Exactly. I remember we still talk about it, like when you were at, I think it was at Northwest. But like what our line of credit was at that point, and just some different things and the challenges going through of being a small business person, that I can do math, but I didn't understand what the math needed to look like. So I think it was back when you were thinking of Blue Ball or whatever it was at that point. There was one time like I had to get like a $10,000 loan for like a week just to cover something because cash flow issues. And the first Traco. And there's people like Jesse that some people might remember. He actually worked with us as a subcontractor at his own business before he came to work for us for a couple of years before he moved to South Carolina. So, the faces that have come and gone over the years, it's really, truly interesting. Deb Hertzler was with us for a bunch of time in the beginning, keeping some of the books. Nikki Crable, just trying to think through the names of people that have come and gone and were instrumental in their time, but they moved on to other things. And it's kind of interesting how that flow has gone. Yeah,
for sure. And so a lot of times, and you said this a few minutes ago, a lot of times when people are like, oh, I'm going to go start a business, they're like, they're making a business plan. They're coming up with, what product or service, gap they're trying to fill, what skill they do well. And, they're really trying to like pitch it to people like, hey, like I can do this and, but I'm going to need some financing. Will you back me? And your story is not like that, right? Your story is kind of like, I can do these things. So I'm just going to go do them. And, I'm going to take on the next big thing that comes along. And that forces you to grow, right?
Unfortunately, yes and no at the same time. A little more foresight might have been helpful at different times, but I remember I was just telling the story the other day when I was doing the perk testing, and what was it? For a little bit there, we were doing a bunch of it. And at that point, like I took the checks that the customers were giving me and just kept them in my safe because I didn't have a need for them. And they were like coming to me like, hey, we need those cashed. It was like, well, I didn't have a use for it. So that's how the first backhoe came to be, because it was like, well, that machine I can do more work with that. And I have the cash to buy this. So let's just go do that now versus oh, okay. Like, that should be profits I should take out or maybe invest in something. No, it was like, okay, another piece of iron. That's how it went. And then it just kind of snowballed. And then we had like a Traco, 2 Tracos and a skid loader for a while. We did most of our work with that. It was amazing the amount of things we did with that one size machine. Like it was a one size fits all. I mean, there was stuff work it could not do, but it was kind of interesting. And it was like, that did a lot more than we do with them now, that same size machine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you sort of like, it's the machine you have, right?
Yes.
Is it the right machine? Maybe not. Maybe, but it's the machine you have. So
we just couldn't call and get Joe to get a low boy to get a different size machine. That was the one and only. So we're going to figure out how it works with what we have. I still remember there's this job down on 401, and it was the first time we had rented like an oversized machine. And it was just so weird because like we didn't have an ability to get it there. We didn't have the machine. And we're renting it for a month, and we're like, we're not sure how long work's going to take. And we're like, we got to do it. And we're like getting it offloaded and all this stuff. And it was just kind of like oh, okay. Now we rent stuff as needed on a daily, weekly basis. But back then we didn't do that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. You did it with what you had. If you needed something else, you just made it work, right? Yeah.
You might do twice the work to get it done, but you were not renting an extra piece of equipment. You were going to get done with what you had.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. When I got here, the business was still, I think maybe somewhere probably between 10 and 15 people. And that sort of has like, that's one of the things that's memorable to me, especially in the early years, is that sort of like, um, growth mindset. I've always kind of been, we joke about this at times, like the one who says like, well, like, it's okay. Let's be a little boring. It's okay to be a little boring. And that's just not your MO, right? You're like, if you get bored, you're going to go find something else to do. And that's what's been really interesting. And it's actually, I don't know if you maybe consider yourself an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is like such a, like a, it's like a,
In our world, that's not, it's a bad word.
right.
Because that used to be what people were considered that didn't really have a job. Like, oh, what's that person or an entrepreneur? Because it was kind of like called like they didn't know what they were doing type scenario. Like to us growing up, business owner was a more prestigious of than
Right. More
entrepreneurship.
respectable. Like you like did something. You weren't trying to find the next thing, right?
Yeah. An entrepreneur back in the day was someone that pivoted a lot. We'll call it that.
Yeah. And that's why I almost hesitated there. Like, you probably wouldn't call yourself an entrepreneur, but I think that you have what a lot of people would consider a very entrepreneurial spirit, and in that, like, looking for the next opportunity is kind of always sort of sitting in the back of your head, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes it's not in the back of the head, even it's right in the front. But no, I was telling this story again. It's funny because I was on a different podcast this week. But I grew up. My parents owned a small business, and a friend of mine's parents owned a small business. And I said my risk meter was broken, and his risk meter was the fact that he went to be a school teacher because of the continuity and the safety of it, because of what he had experienced in his life.
Mm-hmm.
Me, it was just like, all right, this is how it is. Like, you just ride the wave and you go how you go.
Yeah.
But that's change. That's just how it creates your nature, nurture, whatever you want to call it, of how it's happened. But yeah, I think when we moved into this building, we had 7 employees, if I remember correct. And I remember like we bought it, and I'm like, what are we going to do with all this stuff? Like, this space is huge.
We'll never need this whole thing.
Yeah. We have no use for this. And then, like, last year we were putting a expansion on the parking lot and doing some stuff like that. But at that point, it was like there was 3 offices downstairs, and it was basically me in the office and somebody at the front desk, but there was nobody else in the building. And it was just kind of like, what are we doing with that room? I don't know. It's just an extra room that came with the building. I have no use for it.
That's funny. I would say that the last 5 years have been probably a lot different than the first 5 years. But do you see similarities as you go through sort of these phases of business?
Oh, yes. They're the same and yet they're different. I think part of it is I've been able to get great people around me. I remember like Steve Keach back in the day. We hired him as like a consultant and different people to help like get through some things. And the difference in the last 5 years is I've had to reinvent myself again. The first 5 years you're starting something, so you're inventing something out of scratch. And now I'm reinventing myself because of the team and the fact that they run the stuff day to day, and I'm not doing that any longer. But in between there, that was happening on a daily basis, and now that isn't happening the way that it used to. So it's a reinventing. Yes, I don't get to do some of the things I enjoyed, but I also don't do some of the things I didn't enjoy any longer. So it's just trying to, constantly keep up, learning new things, and trying to be, more create beneficial use of my time.
Yeah. The weird one is always like, well, what comes next, right? And I think that you probably had, in the last 5 years of this business's cycle, have had a little more time to think about the next, as opposed to always thinking about like tomorrow.
Yeah, that's the tough part, because that is still just how, I remember we used to meet here in the mornings back in the day. I remember standing on the end of the current concrete, and the guys would come up, and I'd come out of the office at like 5:30, 6 a.m. and literally be telling people where to go for the day. Like, that's how, there was no schedule going out the night before. There was nothing. It was literally show up here at 6 a.m. and all right, you're going to go to this site. You're going to go to this site type of scenario. Um, and that's definitely, our business has some reactionary built into it. So it's tough to like pave a road too far forward. But I always think back, and I was talking about this to somebody the other day about we had a meeting, I don't know what year. It was you and Dan and Luke and I in our basement.
Mm-hmm.
It was like our first like strategy session ever.
Right.
And we wrote some stuff on a board that when I looked at it, I thought we were like hallucinating or something. It's like, yeah, sure. That's cute. That's real cute. And, we didn't work backwards and like systematically work to those places, but we got to all those places we wrote on that board within less time than even what we had projected. Right.
Yeah.
So I was talking to another guy the other day and I was saying about like, I'm not like into that stuff, but it is amazing if you write stuff down, like it can happen. You might not like every day be able to track how close you got to it, but if you look back at it, you said it there and you look back after a year or 5 years, it's like, we were able to make it there.
Right.
Don't know how, but we got there.
But we got there. Yeah, for sure.
I think it was a Saturday morning or something, like the four of us got together.
It was. Yeah, it was. And I was trying to think, we had all like read most of or all of a book.
Yes.
And
I actually was just thinking the other day, I got to reread that again because it's been a couple of years and it was really impactful at that point.
Was that the Strength Finders or was?
No, it was some guy that was like a CEO of like a generator company and he ran like an airline and he had like this whole thing about like you write everything on one page and or something. At that point it was earth shattering. Now I don't know if it would have the same effect.
The same impact.
Yeah, but I was like, maybe I should reread that and see if there's something new to glean out of it. Maybe not the same things, but there might be something new to glean out of that same document.
Yeah, for sure. As the organization has expanded, right, and you've actually, we've added pieces here and there. What is that? What does that feel like for you, knowing the impact that you individually have started to have locally here in our little community, but on a greater scale? Like, I just think about it a little bit. And I'm probably not saying it very clearly here, but like you talked about in the beginning, the first 6-8 years, there's a handful of people, mostly buddies, some family members. And I have to assume at least that at the time there was a lot less sort of pressure to perform. Right?
Like less liabilities on your head.
Yeah, right. You're 6 or 7 people. You don't want to let them down. You don't want to disappoint them. But at the end of the day,
but we're all college kids. We don't have families to support.
Yeah, if you've got to tell them like, hey, tomorrow there's no work, or whatever. Like, it's not at that point in time a huge deal for them.
They might even be looking forward to
it. Yeah. But now as it expands, and I should know the number, but we've probably got 100 plus, families that are connected to this organization or organizations in one way or another. That changes, right?
It does, but it's really weird and challenging because of not being in the day to day. It's kind of like trying to push a cloud, right? Because like you can't really do it, but you're trying to.
Sure.
Because you're a little bit arm's length away from certain things that used to be able to pull a lever and make certain things happen, and those don't do it in that same way. But no, I mean, if there's 200 people, 300 people that, somehow are supported through what we do, that's super important to keep that going.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've always worked in a way where like whatever was left over came to me, not I took mine and then whatever's left over stayed.
Right. Yeah. No, I know what you
and that allowed us to grow because, what we have as far as equipment and stuff is very costly. And, the teams, got to pay their salaries. We got to do all that kind of stuff. So it's very interesting. But that's never changed, but it's just different because of the fact that, you know, um, we created a mini monster, but a mini monster needs to eat a lot more than a little,
Right.
calf does, or whatever you want
Sure.
to call it.
Yeah.
So that definitely has a different vibe to it per se, than it used to, and also like, I interact with a group of direct reports per se on a
Sure.
very regular basis,
Mm-hmm.
but unfortunately I don't get to interact with everybody. But back in the day, when there's only 6 people, everybody, what's going on in their lives, where they're going, what they're up to. And then, you still know that, but you just don't know it as in depth as you might have in the past.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Any, if you could tell your younger self some advice.
Oh, boy.
Got any words of wisdom for you 20 years ago?
Drink less iced tea. Take care of your health a little bit more. No, I mean, it was. I have a trouble with that because the fact is that, like, all the things that happened, good, bad, or indifferent, is what made it what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, can't be like, oh, well, if I did something different, I don't know if it still would have the same result. Being homeschooled or working as a kid or whatever it is. Like, at the time, maybe that wasn't what I was envisioning, but all those pieces make the mosaic of what is today.
Yeah, for sure. How about for somebody else? Somebody else sitting in similar shoes, and they're seeing an opportunity, or they're on the cusp of making that leap.
I mean, I think maybe if that's the advice that I would give myself, it would be to count the cost a little bit better. I'm not talking about financial costs, but the cost to relationships, the cost to it really depends on what. I had someone the other day, a year or two ago, be like, "How did it get there?" And it's like, I've been doing the same thing for 20 some years. Like, it didn't magically just appear overnight. Like,
Sure.
I know the social media might show things that magically appear overnight, but most things don't do it that way. And so, are you willing to be committed to it long enough to actually see it through?
Yeah, for sure. That's great advice. So, any other reflections as we close in on?
Makes me feel old. That's about the way.
That's fair.
We have team members younger than the company. Like, that's how the life has gotten at this point.
Yeah. Wow. That's true. That's fair.
But I think the cool part as growing to what we are and, where we're headed is that the opportunities we can provide for people to grow themselves is really, you said legacy, and it's always funny. You find companies that maybe were a little challenging to work with, and then all of a sudden the founder gets to a point where he's worried about his legacy, and all of a sudden they kind of change their tune. We hope to never do that, because we hope the tune always stays the same and it's not been bad in the first place. You don't have to try and fix it. But, you see young people coming out of schools and different stuff just starting up, and, they have an opportunity here. And the neat thing about the trades is that the ability to learn new things and the ability to get promoted and stuff is probably quicker or as quick as anywhere else. Like, people don't think that. They think that you're in the same position for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is you're not, and even if you're in the same job title, you're doing different things all the time. So you can always be learning something new.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, that's probably a good place to wrap it up. We look forward to the next 20. And thanks for joining us today, folks. We hope you got something from this.